Niccolò Machiavelli once understood a brutal truth about human nature. The crowd never strengthens the individual. It consumes him. The more a man seeks approval, the more he loses authority over his own thoughts. Modern society praises endless communication as if constant social interaction is proof of intelligence, happiness, and success. But beneath the surface lies a darker reality. Most people are no longer capable of silence. They fear isolation because isolation forces them to confront themselves. So they drown in conversations, notifications, opinions, gossip, trends, and noise. Slowly their minds stop belonging to them. This is not a video against friendship. This is a warning against psychological dependence, because the modern world has turned socializing into addiction, and addicted people are easy to control. 1. The crowd replaces your original thoughts. Listen carefully. Most people believe their thoughts belong to them. They believe their opinions are original, they're res are authentic, and their personality is unique. But Machiavelli understood something terrifying about human nature long before the modern world existed. The crowd does not merely influence the individual. It slowly reshapes him until he becomes psychologically identical to everyone around him. Every conversation you entertain carries invisible pressure. Every group you join demands silent obedience. People adjust their language, beliefs, humor, and even emotions just to avoid rejection. At first, the compromise seems harmless. You laugh at jokes you do not find funny. You agree with opinions you secretly question. You silence controversial thoughts because you fear isolation more than dishonesty. But over time, something dangerous happens. The mask becomes your identity. Look around carefully. Most people no longer think. They repeat trends, repeat outrage, repeat motivational slogans, repeat political opinions, repeat the emotional reactions programmed into them by society. The modern man is drowning in voices, and because of this he cannot hear his own. This is why powerful individuals throughout history protected their solitude. Because isolation sharpens thought, while crowds dilute it. A man constantly surrounded by noise eventually loses the ability to examine reality independently. He becomes emotionally manipulated by the opinions of weaker minds. The crowd rewards conformity and punishes individuality. The moment you think differently, people label you arrogant, strange, cold, or dangerous. Not because you are wrong, but because independent thinkers threaten collective comfort. And slowly, without realizing it, socializing transforms into psychological conditioning. Your ambitions begin to change based on what society praises. Your fears begin to mirror the fears of others. Your standards become dependent on approval. You stop asking yourself what is true and begin asking what is acceptable. That is the moment your mind no longer belongs to you. Point 2. Attention is the new currency. Machiavelli understood that power does not belong to the loudest man in the room. It belongs to the man who controls attention. And in the modern world, your attention has become the most valuable resource others are fighting to steal. Every notification, every conversation, every message, every social gathering competes for one thing: access to your mind. Most people wake up and instantly surrender their mental energy to others. Before they even think for themselves, they check who texted them, who liked their post, who mentioned their name, who shared an opinion, who demands their reaction. Their mind is no longer a kingdom, it is public property, controlled by endless distractions disguised as social connection. The dangerous part is that this theft feels pleasurable. Validation creates addiction. Every laugh, every reply, every moment of recognition releases a temporary feeling of importance. But the more attention you seek from others, the weaker your internal discipline becomes. You slowly lose the ability to focus deeply, think clearly, or exist peacefully without external stimulation. Observe modern society carefully. People cannot sit alone for 5 minutes without touching their phones. Silence terrifies them because silence exposes the emptiness underneath constant distraction. So they chase conversations endlessly, not because those conversations matter, but because they fear confronting their own thoughts. This is how socializing quietly destroys mental power. Your focus becomes fragmented. Your goals become interrupted. Your emotional state becomes dependent on reactions from strangers. One negative comment ruins your mood. One ignored message creates anxiety. One moment without validation feels like invisibility. And while you waste your attention trying to be seen, powerful individuals are protecting theirs like a weapon. Because attention directed inward creates intelligence, discipline, strategy, and control. But attention scattered across hundreds of people creates mental exhaustion, insecurity, and weakness. The modern world trains people to constantly react instead of consciously think. That is why so many minds feel overwhelmed, yet accomplish nothing meaningful despite being socially connected every single day. 3. Weak minds fear silence. There was a time when solitude created philosophers, strategists, conquerors, and visionaries. Men once walked alone to sharpen their minds. They used silence to study themselves, to question reality, to build emotional control. But modern society has transformed solitude into something terrifying. Today, the average person cannot survive alone with their thoughts for even a single hour. The moment silence appears, panic follows. They immediately search for noise, music, notifications, messages, conversations, endless scrolling. Anything to escape the uncomfortable truth hiding inside their own mind. Because silence reveals what distraction hides. It exposes insecurity, confusion, emptiness, and emotional dependence. Machiavelli understood that a man who cannot stand alone can never truly control himself. If you constantly need people around you to feel valuable, then your identity is no longer yours. It belongs to the crowd. Weak minds require constant stimulation because they are afraid of self-confrontation. They fear asking dangerous questions. Who am I without validation? What do I actually believe? What happens when nobody is watching me? This is why modern socializing has become psychological sedation. People surround themselves with endless interaction not because they enjoy connection, but because they fear introspection. They fear the silence that would force them to face their failures, weaknesses, and unresolved emotions. So they bury themselves in temporary entertainment and meaningless conversations until their inner world becomes completely neglected. Observe how uncomfortable people become in moments of stillness. They instantly reach for their phones during silence. They fear eating alone. They fear being isolated. They fear disappearing from social attention even briefly because society has conditioned them to believe visibility equals worth. But powerful individuals understand something different. Silence is not punishment. Silence is revelation. In silence, you discover whether your thoughts are truly your own or merely echoes of society. In silence, emotional discipline is built. In silence, clarity emerges while the rest of the world remains mentally intoxicated by endless noise. The man who masters solitude gains immunity from manipulation because he no longer depends on constant social stimulation to feel complete. 4. Emotional contagion is controlling you. Most people believe their emotions are personal. They believe their anxiety, anger, insecurity, and desires originate from within themselves. But Machiavelli understood a dangerous truth about human nature. Emotions spread like disease. A weak mind absorbs the emotional state of everyone around it without resistance. And in a world obsessed with constant socializing, people are unknowingly infecting each other every single day. Walk into a room filled with fear, and suddenly your confidence weakens. Spend enough time around complainers, and your ambition begins to shrink. Surround yourself with insecure people, and eventually you start doubting your own value. This is not a coincidence. Human beings unconsciously mirror emotional energy. The people around you slowly shape your internal world whether you realize it or not. This is why endless social exposure becomes psychologically dangerous. Every conversation carries emotional influence. Every friend group transfers hidden beliefs. Every social platform amplifies outrage, comparison, jealousy, and insecurity. Modern society is emotionally contagious, and most people have no defense against it. Look at social media carefully. One moment you feel peaceful, then suddenly someone displaying wealth, beauty, success, or attention. Instantly your mind shifts from gratitude to inadequacy. You begin comparing your life. You begin questioning your progress. The emotions of strangers start controlling your mental state. And the more socially connected you become, the more emotionally unstable you feel. Machiavelli would call this weakness, because a man ruled by external emotions can never truly govern himself. Powerful individuals understand that protecting the mind requires protecting emotional boundaries. Not every person deserves access to your energy. Not every opinion deserves an emotional reaction. Not every environment deserves your presence. But weak minds absorb everything. They carry the stress of others, the fears of others, the anger of others, until they no longer know which emotions genuinely belong to them. Their identity dissolves into collective chaos, and this is exactly why modern society feels mentally exhausted despite being more socially connected than ever before. 5. The powerful man protects his mind. Machiavelli knew that power begins with self-control. A man who cannot govern his own mind will always become a servant to the opinions, emotions, and expectations of others. That is why truly powerful individuals are extremely selective about who enters their mental world. They understand that every interaction leaves a psychological imprint. Every person either sharpens your mind or weakens it. The modern world teaches the opposite. It tells you to constantly socialize, constantly share, constantly expose your thoughts, emotions, and personal life to everyone around you. But the more accessible you become, the less control you maintain over yourself. Your energy becomes scattered. Your focus becomes diluted. Your emotional state becomes dependent on external reactions. The powerful man moves differently. He values solitude because solitude restores clarity. He speaks carefully because he understands that silence reveals strength while excessive talking exposes weakness. He does not chase attention because he knows attention attracts manipulation. Weak people seek crowds to feel important. Strong people seek isolation to remain dangerous. Notice how society reacts to emotionally disciplined individuals. People call them cold, distant, arrogant, mysterious. Why? Because independence threatens those who survive on emotional dependency. Most people feel uncomfortable around someone who does not desperately seek approval. A man who controls his emotions becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability creates power. This does not mean rejecting humanity completely. Machiavelli never believed isolation meant weakness. He believed selective connection created strength. The powerful man chooses his relationships strategically. He avoids gossip because gossip corrupts the mind. He avoids emotional chaos because chaos destroys focus.